Good evening, everyone. It's M.S.G, and today I'm going to be doing part one of my comprehensive guide, overview, and analysis of Chaos Space Marines in 10th edition. As per the community request, which I put out yesterday, a majority of you, or a vast majority of you, prefer shorter, more digestible videos as opposed to one long form video which would have timestamps in them, which is perfectly fine by me because it means I can work on them a lot more efficiently due to the fact that they are segmented a lot better. But with that said, this is going to be part one. This is just going to cover a brief overview of Dark Pacts, the uses, different marks of Chaos, and why you should play Chaos Space Marines for those that are interested or the newer players that have joined us. With that said, let's continue. So this series will include a lot more than just obviously the Dark Pacts and everything, but obviously I do these in my spare time. I don't really have that much of it, to be honest, with work these days, but I am trying to get these videos out on a somewhat agreeable basis, given the fact that I obviously, want to make sure the people who have subscribed to the channel are actually getting the content that they want. But I digress. Back onto this. Part one of this video is going to include just briefly why you should choose Chaos Space Marines as a faction to play. This will be the first video of a series that I plan to make, which will encompass all of Chaos Space Marines, mainly directed to newer players, as I've mentioned previously, that want to learn how to play Chaos Space Marines or are just getting into them. They're wanting to know what to do, how the marks work, how the army plays, like what play styles you have available to you, etc. And I'm going to try and make it as detailed as I can. I'm not by any means a master at Warhammer 40k. I am very much a casual in a sense of I like to play more casual games as opposed to competitive. I do like to play little tournaments that we have locally, but that's more of a just getting into the game kind of thing. So hopefully more experienced players than I are able to learn something that they might not have learned otherwise. But like I said, it's better for newer players to watch this type of video. So for part one, like I said, it's just going to include a brief introduction of the faction, as well as a thorough look at each Chaos mark. So those are 5 marks. They are Khorne, tzeentch, nurgle, slaanesh, and Chaos Undivided. And I am going to try to be as objective as possible for the sake of just being fair. So I personally prefer the mark of slaanesh on a majority of my units, given I'll explain in future why I do, and you're probably going to see why, because it's mainly due to how they synergize with my particular playstyle. But other marks are really, really good as well. If I do get anything wrong, please, please, please let me know in the comments, because obviously this is a guide. I don't want to misinform anyone or get a rule wrong. I understand that the game is quite complex and there's a lot of rules that are up for debate and quite contentious, but I do try to give as objective as possible. This is what this rule does. This is what that rule does. If I am wrong or I've got something wrong or misinterpreted it, please let me know in the comments. I will appreciate that more than you think. And off topic as well, recently this on the right you can see a noise marine. For some reason the background I used was the Eye of Terror, and for some reason the shoulder pad around here is the image must have registered it in the background, but it's basically just a noise marine that I've painted recently for my Empress Children warband. As like I've said before, I am an Empress Children player. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we get as codex within the next 2 to 3 years. And with that said, let's continue. So, why would you choose the Chaos Space Marines? So, we're going to start off with the pros first, obviously, because start off strong. So, visually, in my opinion, we have excellent models. I think a majority of our model range are exceptionally good to look at. Obviously, you get your outliers like your Huron Blackhearts and a few other models like Custodes, Chaos Spawn, which are quite random, but that's kind of the point. But anyway, it doesn't particularly matter. The big contenders for the best models, the vehicles are fantastic. Lord Discordant's great. Abaddon or Abaddon looks really, really good. Legionaries in general just look way more detailed than the Intercessor counterparts on the Loyalist side. I just think they're a lot more. They've got a lot more personality, and you can do a lot of kit bashes with them as well. Like some of the kit bashes that I've seen, be it green stuff or just switching some arms around and parts around or doing stuff with resin, is just phenomenal. Like the creativity that people have for Chaos is ridiculously high. At the moment, we are strong against most things in melee, and we do have some really hard shooting units, which I'm going to mention later. Obviously, Chaos Space Marines usually has been a melee-based army. We tend to be better at melee than the Loyalists, but they tend to be better at shooting. Like Iron Hands, for example, are better at shooting than we are. But as of recently, our shooting has been extremely strong, really strong. Obliterators, Forge Fiends are still really strong. Havocs, Venom Crawlers for chaff. We've got an answer for everything, which is really good. And it ties into the next point, which is we are extremely adaptable. So we've got mob units like cultists, accursed cultists, and legionaries in order to, throw bodies onto the line. Or if you want to, you can focus more onto a demon engine list, like a Forge Fiend, Mauler Fiend, Land Raiders, Predators, variants like Vindicators, for example. You can focus on them, or Khorne Lord of Skulls if you want to do that. You can focus on a more demon heavy or demon engine heavy list if you want to, which is great. We do have very strong base data sheets, so I say that in the sense of the data sheets we have access to, without any buffs extra, are strong. So that means some factions, for example, have really bad data sheets, like Genestealer cults on average have really bad data sheets, but they hit ludicrously hard because of certain rules and synergies that they've got with the army. Whereas Chaos Space Marines have just got flat good stats across the board on a majority of things, and the army rule that we have enhances that. At the moment, we do have really strong stratagems. So, for example, I'll go more into detail for specific ones, mainly the mark stratagems, but we do have Infernal Rites, I think, which is 2 CP, which is -1 AP, but you can get that for free because it is a battle tactic. I think off the top of my head it's a battle tactic. So if you do have the Chaos Lord free strat ability, you do get that for free. Profane Zeal, which is the stratagem for Chaos Undivided, which I'm sure a majority of the players here that have had a game with Chaos Undivided are familiar with, is phenomenally strong for a single command point. You get a ludicrous amount of kickback from that. But again, I'm going to go into more detail on that when I get to Chaos Undivided. A lot of the army that we have and a lot of rules that we've got synergize really well. Like Dark Pacts are an extremely good rule compared to a majority of other rules that armies do get. We are actually in a really good spot. If you feel like you want to join us because you're a bad guy or you want to play the bad guys, just look no further. We are probably the second worst faction in terms of evil. I think demons probably take it, but you could argue, are they evil or are they just a product of what they are? So if they're born evil, it's like a Pathanax thing from Skyrim. Like, is it better to resist you? I'm not getting into theology. We're bad guys. We've got cool weapons. We've got spikes on everything. That's what we are. We are cool. And if you like that aesthetic, you're welcome to join us. And painting them is extremely rewarding. Like when you see a fully painted Chaos Space Marines army, regardless of what color scheme it is, it looks good. Even if it's only battle ready, it looks really good. Black Legion are a prime example. Black and gold is really easy. You need a steady hand, obviously, because the trim is ridiculously annoying, which I'm going to get onto. But other than that, fully painted, any army really looks good. But I think Chaos Space Marines, due to the fact that they've got that much variety, it looks really, really strong in terms of contrasting colours, in terms of it looks great. It just looks good. Like, I can't really say anything else. The cons, we do have really good shooting, but it's not going to compete. So we're basically a jack of all trades, but we are good at everything. But we're not going to be masters of shooting. We're not going to be kings of melee. So, for example, I've said here, Imperial Guard are going to outshoot us. Some Space Marine chapters, like Iron Hands, especially with the new rules that they've got, they're going to outshoot us. Tau, again, they're the quintessential shooting faction. And Necrons have got some really nasty shooting that we want to be careful of. And we're not the best at melee either. So World Eaters are going to chew us up and spit us out. Custodies are definitely going to chew us up and spit us out due to the fight first stratagem and the fact that their melee is specifically dictated towards killing Space Marines. That includes us. But we do have ways, again, due to our adaptability, to counter this. We can be quite expensive in terms of real life money, not points. A lot of the kits nowadays, especially with the cost of living crisis, have gone up. So, for example, even here, we're feeling it quite a lot. I can't imagine for foreign players. So, for example, people from like Australia are going to have to pay through the nose to even get remotely a decent amount of points, like 1,500 to 2k points. You are looking at a decent chunk, depending on what you want to go for. If you're going for more of a demon heavy friend, like a demon engine list, you're probably not going to spend as much. But if you're going for the full, like Chaos Space Marines, infantry, vehicles, HQs, etc., you're going to be paying a decent to high amount of money, especially with nothing on par with like Gene Stealer, Cults, or Guard, but it's still quite expensive. We have got high skill ceiling, so the adaptability is there, and it's up to the player to utilize that. So you do get people who play Chaos Space Marines, they make a misplay, or they just don't click with the rules, they don't like the play style, and they just give it up, which is fair enough. If you're not clicking with the play style and you're not getting it, then that's fine. You don't have to stay with a faction you don't like, but they're a very rewarding army if you do well with them. You can't be beaten by someone who, other than like from certain situations, which I'm going to mention in the later parts of the future videos, where you can be like, yeah, that's kind of bullshit. Like you feel like you've beaten the opponent because you are better. Like ultimately, it is a dice game. You can just get really unlucky. But a majority of the time, if you win with Chaos Space Marines, it's because you have outthought your opponent or you've outfought your opponent, which is a confusing little conundrum to say, given my accent, but it's still really good. Finally, the con is that some of the models are extremely difficult to paint, and they do require some sub-assembly. So, for example, Forge Fiends are pretty nightmarish to paint. You've got to sub-assembly them. It's not friendly for newer players who are like just into the hobby for like modeling and painting. However, don't let that stop you. So there are tutorials on YouTube for sub-assembly. They are really, really detailed. They can show you different paint methods which you prefer. So, for example, for my paint method, I just spray Chaos Black, dry brush it with Storm Vermin Fur, Cadian Flesh Tone into the panels where I want to paint with the skin tone, and then I put Caribou Crimson on top of it, wait till that dries, and then I just paint another thin layer of Cadian Flesh Tone on it. And for everything else, it's just a simple base coat on a wash. I don't highlight it. I just don't see the point. Unless it's a HQ unit, in which case I will do. But a majority of the time, you kind of get into a rhythm where you just want to stick to painting simple stuff. You have a lot to paint with Chaos Space Marines. Like, for example, the Lord Discordant is a pain in the arse. I had to sub-assembly him. I had to take the rider off. I had to paint the whole body separately. You have to do the engine at the back. You have to put that on after you've painted the inside. You've then got to put all the legs on in order to get like a clean finish. It's just a bit of finicky, but like I said, don't let that put you off, because once they are painted, they look gorgeous. So, onto the bread and butter of the presentation, which is Dark Pacts. So, the detachment rule for Chaos Space Marines at the moment is the Slaves to Darkness, which gives the Dark Pacts rule. So any unit in your army with the Heretic Astartes keyword can do it every time that they shoot or fight. Each unit also has to take a mark of chaos in order to use the rule. So you can't just bring a unit that's, just raptors, no mark of chaos. It's got to have either Khorne, tzeentch, nurgle, slaanesh, or chaos undivided. Each mark will give you access to different improvements to lethal hits or sustained hits 1 on your Dark Pacts. They do not cost any points. In 9th edition, they used to cost points because they gave you a certain ability. So, for example, as an Emperor's Children player, I had to bring Slaanesh mark on every single unit I had. I couldn't bring any khorne, I couldn't bring any nurgle, I had to bring Slaanesh. And Slaanesh gave the fights first rule in combat if you were in combat, which was really, really strong. But anyway, Dark Pacts themselves will give your units weapons, either lethal hits or sustained hits 1. So, again, really strong. You can just, it's a very adaptable thing to have. You really, really do want that. And these only happen on 6s, but that's a big asterisk on that one. Normally, if you get a 6 to hit on lethal hits, it would automatically wound. If you have a 6 on sustained hits, it would give you an extra 1 shot, which is why it's sustained hits 1. There are things like sustained hits 2, where if you get a 6, you will get 2 shots instead of a 1. But in this one, you just get an extra hit. So you get exploding 6s or auto wounding 6s. So once your unit has completed the Dark Pact, you will need to take a leadership test and roll 2d6. If you pass the test, nothing happens, but if you fail, the unit will take d3 mortal wounds, but you can use a feel no pain if you have access to it within the unit. So a prime example is the Possessed. If you have the Master of Possessions, he gives the unit a 6-up feel no pain. If you fail the Dark Pact, which is surprising, but you can fail it, it's not entirely out of question, you will have to roll and take the mortal wounds. If you get 1 and you roll a 6 because it's a 6-up feel no pain, you just ignore it, which is great. Certain stratagems get extra benefits if your unit or model has the corresponding mark of chaos. Some of these are really good, as you will see in the incoming slides. Due to this, the larger the unit, the more use you will get out of a stratagem, but the more vulnerable you will be to blast. So a 10-man unit, a Chosen, is going to get a lot more use out of the Slaanesh stratagem or the Nurgle stratagem because there's more of them in the unit. However, Blast will get an extra 1 shot against the whole unit based on the unit size. Oh, sorry, an extra 2 shots because it's between 6 to 10, I think. Yeah, 11 plus is 3. So, an important one, allies such as Chaos Knights, Demons, and the Lost and Damned, like your... actually, don't really know Lost and Damned, I don't bring them. But basically, any allies that aren't Chaos Space Marines or have the Heretic Astartes keyword cannot use Dark Pacts. They aren't able to. So, your Brigands from your Chaos Knights, your Armigers, your Carnivores, nope, we can't do it. Slaanesh Demons, your Demonettes, your Khorne Demons, Nurgle Demons, tzeentch Demons, cannot use them. And any character that has the unit key, the leader ability, has to share one or the same keywords in order to join the unit. So, for example, Huron, Fabius, and Harken cannot join a unit which has been marked with khorne, as those characters automatically come with the undivided keyword. This is a pretty bad rule in terms of you can't really, they limit a few of the units, which you will see in the upcoming ratings. When I do rank them and analyze each unit, you'll see that this is a big point of taking away from the unit. Chaos Undivided is still a really good mark, though, but again, sometimes you don't want that on a unit. You're wanting to try to run with Harken or Fabius or whatever, but again, just know that if it comes with Undivided preemptively, they can't lead a khorne unit or a tzeentch unit. The unit they have to lead has to be Undivided, unless stated otherwise. So the big part of the skill now, especially, is knowing when to use lethal hits and when to use sustain hits. So the rule of thumb that I've said is that when you're punching up, you want to use lethal hits because auto wounding is going to help you get past the wound roll. And if you're punching down, you want sustained hits. So the good reference to use for your newer players here, if you're wounded on 2s or 3s, it's better to pick sustained hits because you get more damage out that way and you're more likely to get wounds through. Whereas if you're less likely to get wounds through, you're probably better off doing lethal hits so you can bypass rolling. Let's say you get 4 attacks and you roll 3 5s, let's say you get really lucky, and it's auto wounding. They're just flat auto wounds. You don't need to roll 6s to wound or 5s to wound. It's just going to be you've automatically wounded on the hit. And there's a lot of ways to re-roll hits in Chaos Space Marines, which is really good. So, for example, if I charge a unit of 5 Chaos Undivided Warp Talons into a unit of 20 Guardsmen, I would be wounding them on 3s, as the Warp Talon's melee profile is Strength 5 and the Guardsman Toughness characteristic is Toughness 3. On top of this, the Warp Talon's melee weaponry has the Twin Linked ability, which means if I want to, I can re-roll all failed wounds or all wounds in general. So this is a bit of a weird one. You can re-roll wounds you've already passed if you want to, but I don't recommend doing that. So, due to the abundance of attacks that each Warp Talon has, which is 4, we have 20 attacks for 5 models. So, statistically speaking, we would get 3 extra hits, which would give us 23 attacks. Obviously, we're counting in the re-rolling ones from Chaos Undivided. So, when you pop Chaos Undivided, you get to re-roll all hit rolls of 1. So, you might get 1 or 2 extra. But if they were, for example, Mark of Slaanesh, they would probably get around 5 to 8 extra hits on average, due to sustained hits being on 5s and 6s, not just 6s, which would bring them up to 25 to 28 attacks, which would probably, including with the rerolls to wound, wipe the entire unit, which is really good. If the Warp Talons were in combat with anything above Toughness 10, because they are Strength 5 and above, it's best to use the lethal hits, as you are going to be wounding on 6s anyway. This way you will be essentially skipping the wound roll, which in this situation would need 6s. For example, if they were Mark of Khorne, then you would only need 5s and 6s for lethal hits, which increases their lethality against vehicles. So the Warp Talons have got Strength 5, minus 2 AP, 1 damage attacks. The high AP is the really good one because a majority of tanks don't have an invulnerable save. They just have flat armor, and it's usually a 2-up. So the tanks now in that situation, let's say you roll and you get 6 lethal hits, for example, you're going to be rolling 6 dice, 4-ups. And if you fail any of those, it's 1 damage. It's better than nothing. But again, it's extra damage. You're not going to complain. So, time to get specific. The Mark of Khorne is a modified Dark Pact, which gives you lethal hits on a 5-up, which reflects the strength and power of the Blood God. Units that benefit from the Mark of Khorne include Possessed, because they have 4 attacks each. Auto wounding on Strength 6 with 2 damage is good into high toughness vehicles, because chunks of damage into vehicles is usually better. 1 damage is usually better into infantry. 1 to 2 damage is better into infantry. Higher numbers of damage is usually better into your higher bracket units, like your tanks, any vehicles, any light vehicles. Your Warp Talons are really good, as mentioned previously. Accursed Cultists are auto wounding, but you can't run them with the Dark Commune, because the Dark Commune has a Psychic keyword, which I'm going to mention later. Chosen are really good on him because they already get Advance and Charge built into their rule. The Legionaries are, again, they're good for them because they're a melee unit. If they're on an objective, they get to reroll wounds as well, which is a bit redundant, but it's nice for Legionaries to be hitting on 5s and auto wounding. Hitting on 3s and auto wounding on 5s, sorry. Terminators, you get to reroll all hits anyway, so you can just fish for 5-ups in melee, and you are probably going to hit quite a lot of those. The Demon Prince is regular and winged, and with the enhancement, which I will mention in a second, you're going to pretty much destroy even decently tough vehicles in melee, which is phenomenal. And your Exalted Champion, it synergizes really well with his ability, because obviously he gets D3 extra, I think it's D3 extra strength to his weapon. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but he does get an ability like that, which is basically what the Talisman of Burning Blood does. Obviously, Khorne's more dedicated to if you're punching up the harder targets, your tougher targets, because any kind of armor save that's high is going to be difficult to pass through, or the toughness characteristic is high, you're going to be difficult to wound them, so this just nullifies that completely and ignores it. It's not very useful against low toughness targets, because obviously you're going to be wounding them on 2s and 3s anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But it's more of an anti-elite, anti-vehicle, as opposed to anti-chaff. So the change from a 6-up to a 5-up is quite helpful. So mathematically speaking, we're going from a 16% chance to wound on a 6 to a 32 to 33% chance to wound on a 5-up. So you're going to take any probability you can, you're doubling your probability, mathematically speaking, when you do use the dark packs with lethal hits to wound, or you get on the crits for 5s instead of 6s. It adds 16% on a d6. So the Mark of Khorne also gives units that are able to take it the enhancement, which is the Talisman of Burning Blood. This will grant the model +1 strength and +1 attack, and each time the bearer's unit makes a dark pact, you add D3 strength and characteristics, D3 strength and D3 attacks instead. So this only works on the model, not the unit. I should really specify that. I made a typo there, but it's an extra 20 points. So, for example, your Demon Prince, which I will elucidate on in the HQ video in part 2, is fantastic with this because he gets potentially strength 12, or strength 11, sorry. Strength 11, -2 AP, 3 damage. It's just ridiculously strong. It's definitely worth bringing, and you're just throwing out that many attacks. And it's more actually. So it'd be 2. When he's Mark of Khorne, he goes from strength 8 to strength 10. So it'd be potentially strength 13 -2, 3 damage, and you're getting an extra D3 attacks. I think on a strike profile he has 6, so you're getting between 6 to 9 attacks at strength 13, possibly. You're more than likely going to get strength 12, which is good because it breaks that toughness 10, toughness 11 break point, and you're just going to be mulching vehicles with 3 damage hits, which is fantastic. The Mark of Khorne, in addition, also grants an additional benefit to the stratagem Eternal Hatred, or Eternal Hate. Units fight on death on a 3-up instead of a 4-up. So you're going from a 50% chance to a 66% chance, which is, in my opinion, 2/3 of the time you're going to be fighting on death. It's no creations of Battle from 9th edition, but it's still nice to have in your back pocket. It's probably one of the weaker ones because of the unreliability. If you roll low, it's not that good, but again, it's the threat of using that stratagem, which is what your opponent is going to pay attention to, because he's going to think, do I really want to run a unit into these guys? I will kill the unit, but in return, this unit's probably going to kill me. So it's a deterrent, which is what I'm going to explain in the next slide. Important to note as well, no psyker or unit with the psyker keyword can bring the Mark of Khorne because Khorne hates psykers. So the Accursed Cultist can be ran with Mark of Khorne, but they cannot have a leader like the Dark Commune, which has the psyker keyword, with Mark of Khorne. It has to be either the Dark Apostle or anyone else that can lead Accursed Cultist, basically, which I genuinely think is just the Dark Apostle and the Dark Commune. I don't think Accursed Cultist can be led by anyone else. But yeah, anyway. So, there's a diagram here which I'm going to show. So in this example, we've got a use of the Eternal Hatred stratagem. We've got 2 squads of 5 possessed and a 10-man squad of chosen that is in the centre of the board. All of these have the Mark of Khorne. The 2 squads of 5 Death Company Marine Thunderhammer units are going to charge into each unit. And after the Death Company Marines have allocated their attacks, they are probably going to kill the possessed units on average, given how powerful the actual Thunderhammers are in combat, especially with the Blood Angels. They hit really hard. However, in this situation, we've got 3 command points to spare. So, we are going to use these command points on the Eternal Hatred stratagem, which costs 1 CP. Normally, we would need to roll a 4-up, as I've mentioned previously, for each unit on a D6. Sorry, for each model in the unit on a D6. However, because the Mark of Khorne goes up to 66% chance, which is great, we'll take it. So each possessed model, base kit, that hasn't fought already, has 4 attacks, which you cannot use Dark Pact for because of the way the rules is worded. You cannot use Dark Pacts on Fight on Death. So it's more than likely going to kill 1 Death Marine company, possibly more, based on the fact that the possessed are hitting very hard, wounding them on 3s because they're only toughness 4, and they do 2 damage a hit. So if one of them gets through, it's probably going to kill him. So the likelihood of the unit being wiped out from the fight on death is actually quite high. So your opponent, yeah, he may kill the possessed like they do there, but as a result, that squad dies, and then the possessed at the bottom fight on death. They kill all the squad below, and that leaves the chosen squad in the center, holding the mid board, so the rest of your army can move up. So you've spent pretty much 2 CP to guarantee that your opponent's flanking units in that situation have been killed. So if the hypothetical situation dictated that the possessed weren't there and these Death Company Marines wanted to charge into the chosen, the opponent is going to look at that and be like, right, I may be able to kill these chosen on the center of the board, but the deterrent is I will be fighting on death. I am strength 5, so I will be wounding you on 3s. I'm minus 2 AP and I'm 1 damage. Most of my attacks are going to go through and they're going to kill you. So in that situation, the Blood Angels player doesn't really have any choice. He's kind of used as a deterrent. So it's more of a psychological thing where you can threaten your opponent with it as opposed to directly saying, yeah, they're going to, a fight on death at whatever. So for example, you want to be nice to your opponent. So let's say he wants to use these Death Company Marines to charge into the Chosen. I would tell my opponent, I am going to use this stratagem. Do you want to rethink your move? And then just give them time to rethink. Because at the end of the day, you're playing a game. It doesn't really matter. But you've got to be a gentleman about it. You've got to let your opponent know. Don't play gotcha moments because they will really get annoying after a while. I've had a gotcha moment once, and I've never played with a guy again because he just does it all the time. But yeah. So next up is the Mark of Chaos for tzeentch. It modifies your Dark Pact to give you lethal hits on a 5-up instead of melee. It works in shooting. This is an evidence to show the lethality of warp-infused, reality-defying armaments which the servants of tzeentch use. Units which will benefit from the Mark of tzeentch include Obliterators, obviously, because auto-wounding on ridiculously high damaging weapons, like the Heavy Profile on Strength 12, I think it is, for like 4 to 6 damage, depending on your distance, is phenomenal. Sorcerer and Terminator Sorcerer, auto-wounding with a psychic attacks, shooting, your combi bolters, anything like that. Fantastic. High AP on the hazardous profile as well, which is good because then that means it forces your opponent to rely on an invul or an armor save. Havocs with auto cannons, heavy bolters, and Reaper chain cannons are really good with this because you're auto wounding your really bad chaff infantry. So, for example, I think the chain cannons don't have any AP, but if you auto wound with it, it's 1 damage anyway. So you're going to get a save, for example, and it's going to kill the unit that it's shooting at more than likely, like a guardsman unit or other cultists or Gene Stealer cults or anything like that. Traitor Guardsmen are really good for this. So my own personal experience is mainly with the cultist sniper rifle because the sniper rifle is strength 4 minus 2 damage. It's a 36-inch range precision 1 shot, but if you stand still, you're hitting on 3s instead of 4s because it's a heavy. It's well worth it because it cracks that hard to wound threshold. So if I shoot 3 shots and I get, I don't know, 2 5s, I've wounded tanks with it because of the high AP and the damage. It's 2 damage. So if your opponent fails, if you shoot a Space Marine captain and he fails his invulnerable saves, that's 2 damage a shot from guardsmen who are 70 points. You're going to want to take it. If I could say, right, I can kill an opponent's lieutenant or captain with a 70-point unit from miles away that have lethal hits on 5-ups, I'm going to take them. So a little tip for you, take Traitor Guardsmen. They're really good, especially because we don't have access to snipers in general. These are our only access, other than a few units like the Master of Possession. Traitor Guardsmen are really good. And a niche pick, which I wouldn't recommend bringing every game, the Warpsmith. He's mainly useful for the fact that he can hold the Eye of tzeentch, which is what I'm going to mention shortly. And yeah, I'm not going to mention any further on that one. So it's pretty much just the ranged equivalent to the khorne mark. You auto wound on 5-ups with lethal hits in shooting. Again, better against high toughness armor, high toughness or high armor save targets. It's a lot safer to do, obviously, because it's from range. You don't have to get into melee like you do with khorne. Yeah, it basically gives units that are lower on strength the ability to punch up to targets which they really shouldn't be killing, which, again, who cares? It's going to benefit you more. So you're going from a 16% chance, as previously mentioned, to a 33% chance to wound on a 5-up to hit, which, again, fantastic. So the Mark of Tzeentch will give you access to the enhancement, which is the Eye of Tzeentch. It costs 30 points, and it can only be taken by a model that makes a Dark Pact in that turn. Once you've made the Dark Pact and your leadership test is passed, you will gain a command point. So it's important to note that CP regeneration doesn't stack, so you can only get one extra command point per turn on top of one that you get per turn anyway. This costs an additional 30 points, obviously, on the unit. And just 1 second. Sorry about that, just getting a drink. But yeah, you can bring it on the Warpsmith, for example, because he's a HQ unit. He can be brought as one guy because he's, you can bring him with Tzeentch. You don't have to bring him with Cypher, for example, who's Chaos Undivided. You can put him back into the backline somewhere next to your Demon Engines and get semi-reliable CP regeneration. It's a bit of a weird relic, I'm not going to lie, because Abaddon exists, so you don't really need this, but it's nice to have. But yeah, you are limited to gaining only one extra command point from CP regeneration. You do get the additional one from each turn, for example, you get one command point. This is just an extra one that you can get. So the Mark of Tzeentch also grants units an additional benefit to the skin shift stratagem, which means, and it's really good, can resurrect a model to the unit with its full wounds remaining, and in addition will heal any unit that is injured. So I'm going to explain this on the next slide. So in this certain circumstance, we've got 3 squads of Halfkin warriors, which are the Votan's like bread and butter infantry. And in this circumstance, we are going to show you how you can get extra movement from resurrecting and unit coherency. So, ad verbatim, I'm going to show you how to get 1 to 2 inches of extra movement from a unit. As you can see in the center, the Terminator squad that is marked with the Mark of Tzeentch is in the center objective, and they've been shot by the 3 Hearthkin warrior units. So, one Terminator gets killed, and another is on 1 wound. He's injured. So in this circumstance, you notice how I've taken the Terminator from the back of the squad, despite the front squad, the guy at the front of the squad taking, in theory, the brunt of the damage. The reason for this is because you can bring that Terminator back to the front of the squad in unit coherency. So once that's done, the Halfkin Warrior squad is going to in this circumstance, the Halfkin Warrior squad on the right in the middle has overextended and is 12 inches away from this squad. So we're going to see how we can close this gap. So the shooting's done. It's our turn now. So we use the resurrection to bring the Terminator to the front, which narrows the gap. You then move the 5 inches, which we would have already done. I can't be bothered to animate that one, but we'd have moved 5 inches because of the Terminator's movement speed characteristic being 5 inches. The other unit gets healed as well, because it's in addition to resurrecting a model, you get to heal 4 wounds. I think it's 3 wounds. So the Terminator gets back to full health. And because the Terminator at the front of the squad is within 2 other units of the squad, I think it's if you're within a unit of 10, you have to be within 2 inches of 2 other squad mates in the unit based on the coherency rule. But in this circumstance, you've turned a 12-inch charge to a 7-inch charge based on additional movement shenanigans. So well done. So the next Mark of Chaos is the Mark of Nurgle. Mark of Nurgle modifies your Dark Pact to give you sustained hits 1 on a 5-up in shooting. This is to reflect the disgusting glee that the servants of Nurgle will show when expanding plagues and diseases. Units which benefit from the Mark of Nurgle include Forge Fiends, which generate extra high strength and damage shots based on the ectoplasma cannons at strength 10 minus 3 damage. Obliterators are really good because getting extra shots on the medium, heavy, and light profiles is always appreciated. Havocs are really good as well. Mainly, this is how you want to run Havocs, by the way. You want to run them with Mark and Nurgle because you want to bring them with the last cannons. So you're hitting on 3s, you have exploding 5s to hit. In one game, I did manage to roll 4 5s. So I got 8 shots of a las cannon instead of 4, which is phenomenally lucky. But again, don't rely on it. They can be very swingy. Venom Crawlers are really good because the abundance of shots that they have 12 shots each at 120 points. Strength 6 minus 1, AP 2 damage each. You can get about roughly 3 to 6 extra shots, maybe a bit more if you're lucky. The Land Raiders are really good as well, especially from the last cannon shots. You are hitting on 3s most of the time, so if you get that extra 5, it's nice to hit with the extra twin link last cannons are really good. Especially on the Vindicator, because it's D6 shots. If you roll a 6 and then you roll a few 5s, you get, I think it's roughly between 7 to 9 extra. 7 to 9 overall shots, which is, again, fantastic. And Abaddon, mainly for the stratagem, because he's obviously got the Mark of Nurgle anyway. So he's got all marks, so he benefits from the stratagems from everything, which is really good. So mathematically speaking, sustained hits are better on average because of the fact that a majority of the stuff you're wounding on is going to be infantry, and in certain circumstances, obviously against knights it's different, but a majority of the time sustained hits is usually better. And I say that with a big asterisk. It depends on who you're up against. But you want to take more shots because you're more likely to wound on those shots than you are if you were to auto wound on a few shots. You'd hypothetically got the chance to deal more damage. So these are better into chaffing hordes as a result of this. So for example, your Venom Crawler's shooting into a regular Space Marine squad with the Mark of Nurgle, and it gets 12 shots base, which explode on a 5-up. Wounding on 3s with AP1, and they kill a Space Marine outright because it's 2 damage each. It pretty much just shreds them because of the amount of fire that they're experiencing. It will absolutely shred a unit of intercessors or any Space Marine chassis that's toughness 4, 2 wounds. It just shreds them. They can't pass 3-ups on everything. One of them is going to fail eventually, and it's the weight of fire that forces that failure. So the enhancement for the Mark of Nurgle is the Orb of Unlife. So at the end of the phase, you roll 1d6 for every enemy unit within 6 inches of the bearer. You will add 1 to this if you use the Dark Pact that phase, which is more than likely you are going to be Dark Pacting every single turn. Very rarely will you not want to Dark Pact on every unit in every turn. On a 4-up, the enemy unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So if you are in a big combat situation in the middle of the board and your opponent's trying to castle the units, congratulations, you've made it easier for them, easier for yourself to throw the big mortal wound bomb out, chip away a few things with it, and do a lot more damage chipping away at certain units that you wouldn't have even been in engagement range with. And it's only 25 points, which is actually quite expensive. So it's probably worth taking on like a Demon Prince. But again, it's nice to have. Mortal Wounds is nice to have in general. Like, you're never going to say no to it. But the real reason as to why the Mark of Nurgle is so popular is because it's arguably the best stratagem we have access to. This stratagem is called Dark Obscuration. And it normally gives the stealth keyword to any unit, that is being targeted with ranged attacks, which means that if you are, I think it's just -1 to hit from ranged attacks, but if you have the Mark of Nurgle, it does get the -1 to hit. However, you basically get the lone operative rule for the entire unit. So, for example, if you're running a unit of, let's say, I don't know, legionaries, and you're in the middle of the board and you've got Mark of Nurgle on them, and your opponent has an 18-inch gun and is like, right, I'm going to shoot those legionaries, you can reactively do this stratagem after it's declared targets. So, for example, if I say, oh, I'm going to shoot the legionaries in the center, my opponent could then say, if you are going to do that, I'm going to pop Dark Obscuration, and you aren't going to get to shoot this turn unless you want to choose a different target. This is so strong because it's reactive. Having the lone operative rule on a unit of 10 Terminators in the center of the board forces your opponent to get closer to you, which in most circumstances is really, really good because you want them to get close to Terminators, you want to get into combat with Terminators, and you want to hit them hard because Terminators do most of their damage in combat. So I definitely recommend bringing Mark and Nurgle mainly on ranged units, but it's nice to have in specific circumstances with melee units like your Terminators. So I don't really have a stratagem or an example to use because it's literally just you run them up the middle of the board. So I'll just read it ad verbatim. So it says, this is arguably our best defensive stratagem, essentially giving an entire unit with a Mark of Nurgle the lone operative effect, which means they cannot be targeted outside of 12 inches by any shooting attack. In addition, it also grants -1 to any incoming ranged attacks to hit if they do not get within 12 inches of the range, but that will put the enemy at risk of being charged by you in the next turn. So, for example, if they move within 12 inches exactly, shoot at your Terminators on, I don't know, 3s or 4s, whatever the ballistic skill is. It's probably going to be on a 4 up anyway because most stuff's hitting on 3s. Then we're going to miss half of the shots, and then next turn you move the Terminators up 5, and then you make a 7-inch charge, and you are probably going to get in that because 7 inches is like a 50-something% chance, I think, off the top of my head. Because it's the way 2d6 dice work, it's weird. But other units like the Forge Fiend and Havocs do benefit from the Mark of Nurgle and using this stratagem if you need them alive. So, for example, a lot of tournament players will use the Mark of Nurgle on the Forge Fiends mainly for the exploding 5-ups, which is really good. But in addition to this, they will also use it for the stratagem in order to have a unit of Forge Fiend out in the open to then next turn get the shots off. You can't target the Forge Fiend, so you're forced to shoot something else or not shoot at all. And then you move the Forge Fiend up, get more shots on target. Bob's your uncle. Whatever it's shooting at is probably going to die. So, the Mark of Chaos for Slaanesh. So, again, it's the same thing, sustained hits on a 5-up, but this one's in melee, which reflects the excess and unrestrained bliss the Scions of Slaanesh will experience in the thrill of close combat. So, units that benefit from this are possessed as they get exploding 5s with devastating wounds on a Dark Pact, which is great. So, 6s to wound automatically send 2 damage through, no invul save, no armor save. It's just flat damage. It doesn't get counted as a mortal wound either, so there's no mortal wound saves. It's just 2 damage straight through. Really, really good. In addition, you also get access to the stratagem, which gives you advanced shoot and charge. And on a unit of possessed, you want a 9-inch movement, advance and charge. So potentially, if you're lucky, you get 15 inches worth of movement with a 9-inch move and a 6-inch advance, and then you get to charge on top of that, which is stellar. Again, second Warp Talons, 4 attacks each. You get innate wound rerolls with Twin Link melee, and you're just going to spam attacks constantly because the more attacks you get, the more wounds you're rerolling, the more likely it is you're going to get a lot more wounds through than if you were auto wounding. Terminators are really good with it, as well as Legionaries. Extra Power Fist hits are great. Advance and charge strat on a slowish unit like the Terminators is really, really good because it extends that threat range. Dark Apostle, +1 to wound in melee on the unit is attached to, and having extra hits on the unit and him means more chances for damage, which is great. And finally, the Demon Prince with Wings, mainly with the Elixir. He is 210 points, which is very expensive, but he is very fast, flies, and is an exceptional melee threat. He's really, really good. So more hits in melee against anything you're wounding on a 4-up is usually better, as you're more likely to hit a 4-up than a 5-up. So the enhancement, as I mentioned earlier, the Elixir, or the Intoxicating Elixir, is arguably our best enhancement. I think it is, in my opinion. So what it does is it gives the model it's equipped with a 5-up feel no pain, which is fantastic because we don't really have access to feel no pains in the index. So the extra durability on a big chassis like a Demon Prince, for example, is great. You get that extra reliability in case your opponent sends through any wounds. You can use feel no pains on pretty much any wounds that come through. So it's not a mortal wound. So it's just any wound that comes through, you have a chance to roll for each a 5-up, you ignore it, which is great. And if you attack a unit, it also gets a battle. You have to take a battle shock test on it, which is great. That only costs 15 points. It's the cheapest enhancement we have access to, which is definitely worth it, in my opinion. I think it's arguably the best enhancement, other than the last one, which is what I'm going to mention. So the Marcus Slaanesh units get the additional benefit from the unnatural swiftness stratagem. So normally the unit is eligible to fall back, shoot, and charge. However, with the mark, it means you can instead advance, shoot, and charge as well. This is game-changingly good because of the threat range indication from certain units. Most of the time, your opponent, even if he's mildly experienced, is going to go, right, Terminators are a 5-inch move. The threat range is about, you usually add 6 to 8 inches on that for the charge distance. So they'd between 13 to 11 inches threat range. So your Terminators have gone from 11 to 13 inches to probably 16 to 18 inches because of the way the advance roll works. So I'll explain this in the next slide as I have a diagram mainly for the Demon Prince, but again, I will explain this. This, in my opinion, is my favourite stratagem. I think this is great. It's so good to get that fast, manoeuvrable movement in there, get in and start hitting them before they even realise what's happening. So, movement is one of, if not the most important thing to utilise effectively when you are playing Warhammer 40k. Positioning ties directly into this, as you need to utilise your movement in order to position well. In this situation, the diagram below is going to provide an example of when to use the unnatural swiftness stratagem. The Demon Prince, on the top left, is hidden behind obscuring terrain in order to not be shot at. But the crisis suits in the centre of the board decide to fall back on top of the building, as the Demon Prince's threat range is large due to his high movement speed. However, the Tau player in this circumstance is doing this to bait the Demon Prince into the open to shoot it. So, this is where the stratagem comes in. So, the Demon Prince is going to move 8 inches, which is what he'd normally move because he's not winged. He's then going to advance 3, which moves him roughly into vision of the crisis suits. So normally, that would be it. You don't get to shoot because you're advancing, and the gun he has doesn't have the assault keyword. To my knowledge, it doesn't have the assault keyword. In this situation, the crisis suits would skip to the next turn. The crisis suits would be able to shoot him and probably do a lot of damage to the Demon Prince. So this is where the stratagem comes into place. So we use, that's supposed to say 8, not 12, but use the 8-inch movement. We move the Demon Prince up to the middle of the board and advance him d6. So for fairness sake, we've put 3 because you're probably going to get a 3 or a 4 on an advance roll. If you get higher, that's great. If you get lower, it sucks. But again, you can't really do anything. It's a dice game. You'll then be able to shoot the Infernal Cannon, which is 3 shots, strength 5, -1/2 damage. So you're probably going to kill a few drones, maybe even kill a crisis suit if you're lucky. And then, once they're softened up, you can then charge the unit, which would be the next one. So normally, you would have been 9 inches away from a deep strike charge, which has a 28% probability of working, whereas the 6-inch charge from this has that 6-inch threat range has been closed into a charge based on the fact that the 6-inch charge has a 72% chance of working. So just to reiterate, now fall back into the building, not onto the building, into the building, to bait the Demon Prince into coming towards them. So the Demon Prince thinks, oh, coast is clear, I'm going to move up and I'm going to advance onto the objective. Out are waiting for that to happen, but normally, because he has the unnatural swiftness stratagem, he's able to then charge into the Tau, which they didn't expect. So their bait has overextended them, and the Demon Prince, because of the stratagem, is now able to get into that like 6-inch threat range and get in there, and he's probably going to kill them based on the likelihood of the charge kicking off and the fact that the Demon Prince is an absolute monster in melee. So finally, we have the Mark of Chaos Undivided, which is the most unique one in my aspect because it's very peculiar. So the Mark of Chaos Undivided grants rerolls of 1s to hit on attacks, both ranged and melee. This is actually pretty. It's not too bad, but in terms of on average, it's weaker than Dart Pacts for other marks. On average, it's not bad by any stretch, but I still think it's pretty good. So the units which benefit from this are Dark Apostle, Liber Hereticus, and Profane Zeal. You are going to be hearing those two sayings a lot in this slide, and there is a reason why. So you get the Profane Zeal and Liber Hereticus, which is super strong. +1 to wound in melee ability on the Chosen and Legionaries blob is fantastic. So you're wounding most things on 2s and 3s, and you get to reroll all hits and all wounds. And you get both lethals and sustained hits on 6s, which is really good. So the Possessed are really good again. Master of Possessions with Undivided, Liber Hereticus, and Profane Zeal. A lot of Chaos players are familiar with this stratagem. It basically means anything in combat with it is probably going to die. Obliterators are really good on this one. Originally, I didn't think they would be, but they actually are. You can give them reroll all hits and all wounds for a CP on a heavy hitting shooting unit. So, for example, if you deep strike these guys in, they are 9 inches away from, I don't know, a tank, for example, a Lehman Russ. You're going to be wounding the Lehman Russ on 3s, hitting on 3s, reroll everything. You might get an extra hit or an auto wound, and you basically have 6 damage a shot, 3 wounds through, that's 18 damage. Congratulations, the Lehman Russ has now been deleted. And the fourth is Dark Commune. So the Dark Commune are arguably our cheapest HQ unit. They are 55 points, but if you pay for the Liber Hereticus and use the Profane Zeal stratagem, you get once per battle, +1 to hit on a blob of accursed or whoever they're leading. The best way to deal with them is with the accursed cultist, though. So +1 to hit, +1 to wound, full rerolls to hit and wound, and you get advance and charge on the cultists. And a lot of people underestimate this because they think, oh, accursed cultists, they're just chaff. They may be chaff, but trust me, a lot of people underestimate them. These guys can hit hard, especially because of +1 to hit and +1 to wound. Do not underestimate accursed cultists. They are really, really good. Mathematically speaking, rerolling 1s to hit on a unit increases the efficacy of the unit when hitting something by 16.7%. So more reliability when hitting your targets. Fantastic. Not really going to say anything bad about that. Reliability is the cornerstone of any competitive list. So you want to look at, from an impartial perspective, the main cornerstones for a good list are movement. Does it hit hard? Is it worth the points cost? And can I rely on it? Because there's some strategies in certain lists where, yeah, they hit hard, and if the dice roll well, you're really strong and you can wipe out anybody. But it's on one big word, if. Mark of Chaos Undivided is arguably the most reliable mark because of the rerolls. Rerolls equals reliability, and reliability wins you the game. A majority of the time. It's a big asterisk. There's a lot more to it, but extra reliability is phenomenal. So, the stratagem and the enhancement. We'll start off with the enhancement first because it's top. So, it gives you access to arguably our most powerful enhancement, which is the Liber Hereticus. This enhancement offers the bearer's unit both lethal hits and sustained hits 1 when making a Dart Pact on 6s. I don't have to explain how strong this is, but I will do. So the way it works is, let's say we have a unit of 10 possessed, and we are hitting on 3s. Because of, I don't know, we get +1 to wound in melee, +1 to hit and +1 to wound on the Master of Possessions because he uses dagger, but that doesn't apply to the unit. So a 10-man possessed squad is 40 attacks base kit. The Master of Possessions has a Liber Hereticus, so they get to reroll reroll hits of 1 base kit, so they're not going to be using Profane Zeal. So 40 attacks hitting on 3s. Probability of most of them going through per attack is 66%. So you're probably going to hit a majority of them. You're going to hit like maybe between 20 to 30, probably about 25 for argument's sake. We'll say 25. So 25 of those attacks have gone through. 3 of those attacks, maybe 4 of those attacks, are going to be 6s. You might get less, you might get more. But those 6s auto wound, and in addition, generate an additional attack, which you will need to roll to wound for, but you have basically just got an extra 4 hits and 4 auto wounds for free on top of that, which is 8 damage. And then you've got the other attacks that you've got to roll to wound for, which if you use the Profane Zeal stratagem, you get to reroll everything. So the amount of damage coming through, I can't emphasize enough how nasty this is. It's ridiculous. You basically point it at something, it's going to die. More than likely, it's dead. Your big, hard-hitting knights, your hard-to-move, like, brick units. Throw these at it, and it's probably going to kill it. It's genuinely ridiculous. And you get devastating wounds as well on 6s. So if you use the Profane Zeal stratagem, any of those 6s for them extra hits you've got are auto-wounding, ignoring invuls and ignoring armor saves, 2 damage flat, boom, done. It's fantastic. I don't need to explain it anymore. It is expensive on a 40-point cost, but it's probably well worth it if you do run that Master Possessions and Possessed blob. So, Chaos Divided stratagem is Profane Zeal, and the amount of improvement this offers from the base kit Dark Pact of rerolling once to hit, that's nice, like I've said before. Rerolling all hit rolls and all wound rolls for every attack in a unit is ludicrous. And the best part is, if you do, for example, let's say you run a Chaos Lord with Chosen, a 10-man squad of Chosen, that's 4 attacks each, 40 attacks, re-rolling all hits, hitting on 3s, re-rolling all wounds, auto-wounding on 6s to hit, as well as generating an additional hit because you're going to use Profane Zeal on them for free because it's a battle tactic. So you get the Profane Zeal stratagem for free. So I will reiterate this. Chaos Lord with 10 Chosen, we'll do the Chosen because it's easier. 40 attacks, hitting on 3s, re-rolling all hits, re-rolling all wounds, any 6s auto wound, and in addition, generate an additional hit. All of those attacks that have gone through and hit to wound, reroll every single wound for free. And it's just, I know I'm going to sound a bit of a fangirl, to be honest, but I don't care. It's so strong. I highly recommend running Chaos Undivided because of that. I don't have any examples I can show you because it's just, I'd rather you sit down now and go, right, I'm going to do this in my next game, do it, and you'll see what I mean. It is genuinely ridiculous. But yeah, with that said, thank you for watching. Like I said, hopefully you learned something new. And again, this is just part 1. So part 2 is ideally going to be focused on delving into the the HQ units of Chaos Space Marines, the data sheets, uses and tactics, synergies, and overall ranking. Part 3 will focus on battle line and troop choices, so legionaries and cultists, and the usage you can do, certain strats, certain positioning, certain tactics, etc. But yeah, with that said, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. I do try to make as often as I can do. I do have a lot of stuff that I have in my life at the minute, unfortunately, but I do try to make these and work on them as soon as I can. But yeah, feel free to share the video if you enjoyed it. Please feel free to send it to your friends if they're also interested in maybe countering Chaos Space Marines to understand it. better, or if they just want to learn more about a certain faction because they want to get into it. And yeah, I hope whoever's watching this has a really, really fantastic day. And always remember to praise the dark gods. Cheers. See you later.